have been off for about 2 months. The scouting work has been ongoing for the last year and a half. And today, Raptors assistant general manager met with the Toronto media to discuss what the Toronto Raptors potentially would be doing in the NBA draft on Wednesday. We'll have you covered with our draft show. Myself and Erson will be breaking it all down in real time, live. If you want to see me come crash out because the Raptors trade their number 9 pick for Malik Monk, please, Lord, do not let that happen. We'll have that. If you want to see me throw confetti in the air and pop champagne as I completely screw up my sound dashboard and my screen and my computer as they pick Carter Bryant, well, that reaction will be there for you as well. So today, I think very interestingly enough, a lot of players have been linked to the Toronto Raptors, from Noah Sengye to Kaman Malawach to Carter Bryant to Neat Clifford to Cedric Coward. There's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of people saying, okay, well, this is where the Raptors going. This is where the Raptors might draft, Derek Queen, Kasparis Yakuchonis. That's a very Darko type of guy. Yegor Demon might be what they're looking for. There's a lot of players that sort of fit the mold for the Raptors, and I think this is a dream draft for the Toronto Raptors at number 9 because there are a lot of players in the mix who do satisfy a lot of what the Raptors historically look for. What do the Raptors historically look for? Well, they typically look for hard workers, high character guys, untapped potential, production. They look for wingspan. They look for athletic tools. They look for, good character guys, good vision, maybe underrated passers, something like that. And especially with Darko Rajovic now in tow, they're definitely looking for players with high feel, high playmaking potential. And I think that rules out a few players that a lot of people like to talk about. But I also think that really elevates a few players. And then, of course, there's the couple of big events that have happened in the NBA around this draft, and the Raptors are certainly paying attention. And number one, the two teams we just saw go to the NBA Finals. How did they succeed? What is the alchemy of the Indiana Pacers and the OKC Thunder? If you're listening to me all year, you hear the Raptors implementing new culture, the Raptors bringing in team first guys, unselfishness, togetherness, camaraderie. You hear Jalen Williams talking after the NBA Finals was over, and all he's talking about is the togetherness of the group, how they fight for each other. Well, the Raptors have been implementing this culture shift for the last year and a half to 2 years under Darko Rajovic, and I think it's been a beautiful thing. And you can sort of see that going forward. But the Raptors are probably not going to have another lottery pick for a while. So it is very imperative that they knock this one out of the park. The Raptors have had 3 lottery picks in the Masai Ujiri era, and that's been Jakob Poeltl, which was through the Andre Bargnani trade. So that wasn't their own pick. The pick that they had from their own pick was initially given to the Houston Rockets for Kyle Lowry, which I think was traded away to the OKC Thunder, which became Steven Adams, which would have, by the way, become Giannis Antetokounmpo that year. But the Raptors ended up with the 20th pick the next year, drafted Bruno Caboclo. But I think the Raptors have done very, very well. But they haven't picked high very often under Masai Ujiri. They got Jakob Poeltl, they got Scotty Barnes, they got Grady Dick. I think jury's still out on Grady Dick, but 2 out of 3 ain't so bad so far. And Grady is probably still going to be fine. But with the number 9 pick, this is about as high as the Raptors have picked in almost a decade, which is probably, a weird flex for Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster, Dan Tolzman, Jeff Weltman previously, and the success of this organization, possibly also an indictment on this organization for how many first-round picks they've traded away. And again, I don't expect this team to be picking high next year unless something really drastic happens with RJ, Jakob, they shut it down or whatever. So it's very imperative that they get this one right. So we're going to look at Dan Tolzman's interview. It's about a 23-minute interview and break it all down and see, did he really kind of tip his hand on who the Raptors are going to draft? And then we'll talk about who he could be talking about, and we'll try to guess who those players are that they're really targeting. Let's get to it.
Who you picking?
I called it. I told JQ I know what the first question will be and who's going to ask it.
There's one joke to make. We make it, and then we ask the real question.
I think it's the same answer every year. I have no idea.
Fact check true.
We'll see, though.
A lot of the talk for a while now has been how much stronger this year's draft is compared to last year. I'm sure a lot of that just has to do with the level of guys at the top. Once you get to the mid to late lottery area, do you feel like there's a big difference from what was available in that range last year?
I understand that this is a Dan Tolzman interview and not a PENSARE basketball interview, but I hope he says not really.
I'm not. I want to say not necessarily, but I mean, we liked last year's draft too. It's such an eye of the beholder thing. Like, I think this is a very strong draft. I think it's maybe a little deeper, just in terms of guys who can come in and impact right away. But I just think drafts they're like this every year. Like, you convince yourself that there's either a ton of talent up top and not much elsewhere. This year, I feel like, we like where we're at, and we're kind of focusing on that more so than what a normal draft looked like or previous drafts look like. But I would say it's a range that we like a lot, and we felt pretty good about last year, and I think we got a really good one last year in Jacoby in a similar range. I mean, close to the lottery, but yeah, I would say it's a good draft is probably the best way to say it.
By saying you like where you're at, like obviously you have all the relevant discussions, but does a move up or down seem, I mean, it's not like you have made a ton of those anyway, but does it seem even less likely at this point on Monday of draft week?
I mean, so much of the trade discussions, it always takes another team to make those moves. It doesn't seem like there's many options out there, at least to move up. Like, I think there's a lot of people that have the same feeling as we do that the top 10, the lottery, whatever, is a pretty good place to be. There's definitely interest in people trying to get our pick, I think, for the same reason. Like, it's an interesting group of players around there. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say it's any percentage chance that we do one or the other, but there's definitely conversations being had of teams trying to get into the top 10 for the same reason as why we like being here right now.
Masai identified the backup center position as an area of need after the season. Seems to be a lot of quality bigs in that range.
Josh, I don't think they've explored moving up very much. And in fact, I just want to, point out to something, and not that I want to make this all, herky jerky and all cut up, but I think that is very, very important that we start to look at draft picks, not as where the player was drafted, but two very critical components. Number one, where were they on your board? Number two, a few years out, where would they be in a redraft? This is very important. I'm sick of hearing James Wiseman was the number 2 pick. Irrelevant. There are some teams out there that wouldn't have picked him top 5. There's some teams out there that would have picked him number 1. I need to know where you're at. So with Jacoby, Grady, right? Now, I have no idea how high Grady was on their board. Maybe he was 11th. Maybe he was 10th. But you don't know that Jacoby wasn't 8th or 9th on their board last year. And then he fell to 19th. So you get one guy at 13th. You get one guy at 19th. It's the same thing with Pascal Siakam. They picked Pascal at 27. Where was he on their board? 17, 16, 15, 14? I don't know. I mean, a really good example of this, ironically, is the Detroit Pistons 3 years ago. They had Jaden Ivey as number 4 on their board. They had Jalen Duren, this is from a source that I talked to in the Detroit area, number 5 on their board. So what happens? Jaden Ivey drops to 5. They were at 5. Jaden Ivey drops because he didn't want to work out for the Sacramento Kings. They had too many guards. By the way, good job, Jaden Ivey. He ends up dropping to 5. Keegan Murray goes to 4. So they picked the number 4 player on their board at number 5. What's interesting is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 go off the board, and their 5th player is still on the board, and that's Jalen Duren. So they pick him 13th. Did they just get 2 top 5 picks, or did they get the 5th pick and the 13th pick? For my money, it's much better to pick a guy that's number 5 on your board at 13 than it is number 5, just because you just saved two maybe $8 million, $9 million over a few years. So that's kind of how I see it. Beauty is completely in the eye of the beholder, but you have to remember, where did you have the guy, right? So I'm going to give you an example. Right now, for me, let's just say Carter Bryant is 4th on my board. I'll do a final big board tomorrow. Let's just say he's 4th on my board. And then he just so happens, that Kaman is number 3 on their board. Let's just say. So if you pick Kaman at number 9, and then suddenly, 13 with Atlanta starts getting dangled out, and Carter Bryant's still on the board, what would you trade to get 2 of your top 5 guys in this draft? You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter. Like the 13, 15, that shit doesn't matter. Okay. And then finally, the point that I was making earlier was, what's the production like? Right? Everyone brings up, again, I brought up James Wiseman. You can talk about Anthony Bennett, but those are obvious flops. What about guys who are not so obvious flops? Right? A guy like Jarris Walker right now, who's not really getting a lot of rotation minutes in Indiana, still a lot of potential. Taylor Hendricks, tough injury, both lottery guys, right? So where would those guys go today? That's their value. RJ Barrett was a 3rd overall pick, right? In, I think, 2018. He was 3rd overall, 2018. Where would he go in a redraft? Would he go top 3? If so, great. If not, you have to stop thinking about him like a top 3 pick. Jalen Green is the best example. Jalen Green just got traded as salary filler. He was picked in the 2021 NBA draft, and there was some real conversation. Y'all don't want to remember this, between him and Cade Cunningham the entire year. That was the huge debate. Jalen Green, Cade Cunningham, all year. Evan Mobley was not really in that conversation. Scotty Barnes, Jalen Suggs, they weren't in that conversation. It was a 2-player draft, and Jalen Green was petitioning for the Pistons to pick him, and the Pistons chose Cade. Smart move. But in all honesty, I didn't have Jalen Green top 4 on my board that year. I had him 5th, and I probably should have had him much lower, but I was too chicken to do it. But based on what you've seen from Jalen Green today, where would he go in a redraft? Would he go top 7? If not, that's why he just got dumped for salary filler, because he's paid like a top 7 pick. You look at a player like Trey Murphy, who was picked, I think, 16th or 17th in that year's draft. He would definitively go top 8, and that's his value. So Herb Jones was picked in the same draft in the 2nd round. He has more value than Jalen Green right now. So that's kind of the point. You have to hit on these picks. So the best case scenario for the Raptors is they pick the 2nd best player in this draft at number 9. That would be the best thing.
I know you guys always talk about best player available when it comes to the draft, but would that kind of be a perfect storm if the guy at the top of your board at 9 ends up being somebody that checks off boxes in terms of need as well?
I wouldn't say it's impacting our decision making at all with 9. I mean, you guys know, like, one of the hardest positions to play, especially for young players, is a center position, and so there can't be a ton of expectation that whoever we would take at 9, if they are a center, that they can come in and fill those minutes right away anyways. So to draft that position with the idea that they would for sure be a backup center playing X number of minutes next year is kind of hard to say anyways. I think because of that, we're going to take the best available regardless of position, just because that's the way we operate. But also, actual rotation minutes is probably easier to fill, in free agency or trade or the different scenarios than to actually bank on a draft pick coming in and doing that. If they can do that, like you said, like that's a perfect scenario. But to make that decision in, late June and then hope by October that you're actually getting that production, that it's just too hard to plan with that in mind.
That's a really good point. And they did that, right, with Scotty Barnes. They drafted Scotty Barnes even though Jalen Suggs filled more of a need, right? If you're really looking at that draft, Josh Giddey, Jalen Suggs probably made more sense on the roster. Shit, Davion Mitchell might have made more sense on the roster because people were talking about Davion Mitchell as a potential top 6 guy. They go with the guy who actually had a lot of overlap with Siakam. And if you remember the draft night, reaction from Kendrick Perkins, it was immediately, let me pour one out for Spicy P. Some talk about Pascal Siakam coming right towards the end of this because he had some very interesting comments about his time in Toronto after the game yesterday. But anyways, the Raptors have always operated this way. And, back-to-back years, they drafted wings in the 1st round, Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter. Can they necessarily play together? I think they can. But you already have RJ Barrett, and then you already had Ochai Agbaji. Was Jacoby like the right fit? Wouldn't have made more sense? If you think about it, think about what I'm saying. Last year, I was petitioning for Eve Nisi, right? A lot of y'all were saying Khalil Ware, Deron Holmes, because we were all thinking the same thing. The Raptors have a desperate need for a backup big, right? Behind Jakob Pertl. We could use that Nick Claxton type. They didn't do that. So why would they do that now? They never do that. They're never going to do that. So as much as you think Kaman Malawach makes so much sense, if they don't think Kaman Malawach is better than Nick Clifford and Carter Bryant, they're not going to pick him. I love this organization for that.
The role of the center in the NBA has changed so much nowadays. What are the particular traits that you would look for if you guys were to try to evaluate the center position in particular in the draft?
I think probably the most important thing for us is our style of play. You know, like the way we like to play. I think you all see it with Jakob in terms of like playing through him, letting him be a bit of an operator in the high post, and what he brings to our defense as well. I mean, you could kind of play it two ways. Like it's always good to have another center alongside him who maybe does the opposite. It's also good to, with the way we play, you can see how he's effective. It'd be good to have 48 minutes of that same type of guy because of what it does for us. So we're definitely looking at kind of both sides of the coin in terms of what's the best type of player to pair with him.
So basically, Derek Queen, some players that sort of filled the need, and I'll just go through the center prospects really quickly. Obviously, number one center prospect, Kaman Malawach. Not much of a playmaker right now, but maybe that's something you can still mold. He's 18 years old. If you could figure that out, really good drop big, has some potential on switches, really good hands, really high level of feel for a player this young in the NBA. That's a very, very good thing for him. And obviously, you can't teach 7'2" with a 7'7" wingspan. I don't necessarily think the Africa thing swings the Raptors much, but there's always talk about it. The reason I think it swings the Raptors at all, and the reason why these narratives exist, because they have had success with Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, and so many African players, I think it's just because they're much more plugged into the backstories and the back channels of these players. So they just have more intel. So naturally, if you have more intel about Ulrich or more intel about Siakam, you've seen him longer, you have a better idea of understanding the trajectory of the player, you might be higher on that player than other people. That's why you're going to keep picking them. If other teams were just as high on Siakam, he wouldn't have been available at 27 anyway, right? So I don't necessarily buy they're going to pick Kaman because he's African. That's stupid. If they pick Kaman, it's going to be because they know more about Kaman than pretty much anyone else in this draft cycle. But quickly, Kaman, Thomas Sorber, Derek Queen, those are kind of the guys who are fringy lottery. Go a little bit out of the box, Colin Murray-Boyles, potential small ball center who can play a little bit there. Go a little bit more out of the box, you get Danny Wolf, potentially. Projected more in the middle of the first round, but maybe beauty really is in the eye of the beholder, and they just really love Danny Wolf, and there's a lot to like there. I wouldn't pick him top 12, but someone might. There's been rumors. They've worked him out. So there definitely is some talk there. Thomas Sorber, I mentioned. Asa Newell. And then not a center, but definitely more of a hybrid forward in Noah Senge. I think those are the people that kind of make sense in terms of addressing center depth. Obviously, Noah Senge is probably 6 years away from being able to play center competently, but kind of goes to the point that Dan Tolzman was making of wouldn't it be interesting to have the opposite come off the bench? And I do think you have to also factor in your existing center depth. You don't have a lot. I understand Colin Castleton may not be on this team, but Ulrich has flashed some short roll potential, some good shooting upside. Let's call it projectable shooting. Let's also say he's a dominant shot blocker at the G League level. So I don't know how much he's in their plans, but Summer League will certainly reveal that. This is not, by the way, guys, I will never be okay with going for a center because you need a center at number 9. Definitely go for the best player available.
And again, that says in terms of a free agency discussion too. It's kind of, I think the way we've always approached every position is we like guys that can play both sides of the ball. And if they're not going to play on the defense, I think Darko's made it pretty clear that you're going to have a hard time playing. That wouldn't change at all, whether it's a draft pick or a free agent, because I think anyone coming in understands you're going to be held to a certain standard on the defensive side of the ball to then be given more rope offensively. I think that would be a big part of any type of guy we're looking at, whether it's a center or any position.
I feel like this really narrows the field. They've brought up this defense, two-way stuff many times. Obviously, the Raptors were a top 5 defense for the last 44 games of the season. They're really shifting that towards their identity. If they watch the NBA Finals, point of attack defense, switchable wings, multi-positional defenders, portable defenders, very important in today's NBA. We watched the Raptors implement their MIG and all that stuff. Y'all remember, had that huge debate with awful coaching. He came on the channel. We were debating the Raptors' defensive philosophy, strategy, whatever, their high pickup points, their ineffective defense, but the defense became a lot better. And so now you're looking at two players kind of looking at the outside, looking in defensively, which is Grady Dick and RJ Barrett. You kind of already have two major holes defensively. Emmanuel Quickley is not great defensively. Jakob Poeltl is no Rudy Gobert. Jacoby Walter has upside. Jonathan Mobley was very good. Jamal Shed has upside. Jamison Battle can be solid-ish in that area, but adding a switchable wing who can defend at this place in the draft seems to be of high priority for this team. I feel like they should be narrowing in on a wing who can really, really guard the ball.
Are you guys pretty confident that you know who's going to go 1 through 8 in whatever order it is? Like most years, you have a group. You know they're going to go. They're going to be gone before they do.
I don't know if I'd say confident. I think we definitely have a bit of a feeling of who could go ahead. I think there's always a chance of one, maybe two guys kind of sneaking in there that change things up a little bit. It does seem like, at least if I'm reading all the stuff online and the public stuff and the sources, if you will, that it seems like there's 8 players that are being named to go ahead of us. If it goes that way, like, I'd actually be really surprised. It doesn't seem like any draft ever goes the way that it says it does to begin. So we're kind of preparing for, different scenarios of if all 8 go that are supposed to, what are we looking at? And then if one player slides in, that might shift things again. Like who are we looking at that might drop to us as well?
Just one more to go into the second round with the 39th pick. Have you found that the NIL landscape has affected that group of players at 39 with European guys coming? Or?
Honestly, man, again, I'm trying to be positive, trying to turn a new leaf. I'm trying my best to not lose my mind on some of these questions. Look, you have been gifted an opportunity to ask the assistant general manager a question about the draft. Try not to waste it on, do you know who the first 8 guys are? And has NIL impacted? Like, I can answer these questions for you. You know what, Doug Smith? Email me. I promise you. These questions, I swear to God, bro, if AI can answer your questions, do me a favor. Ask ChatGPT these questions. Seriously. Has NIL impacted? ChatGPT will give you a better answer than Dan Tolzman. Do you know who the first 8 players going ahead of you are? ChatGPT will tell you the draft is unpredictable. Why are you wasting this dude's time? You fucking asshole. You're wasting his time. Like, you are literally wasting this guy's time. He's supposed to be on the call, on the phone making calls. He's devoted 30 minutes to you, and you're just sitting here babbling bullshit and asking questions you could fucking answer yourself. So,
how is that playing into that?
We need a plague, man.
Yeah, I think it's obvious that it has impacted it a lot. I think this early second round, discussion where in the past that was a pretty good contract for a kid in college to like stay in the draft for. Now with NIL, it's pretty much comparable to what they could get and stay in college. So how many of those guys? It's probably more of the younger players that would usually stay in to the draft, and that's who we would probably be picking from at 39. A lot of those guys are going back to college for another year before making the jump, and so we're looking at maybe a little bit older group of players than what we normally do, and that's not a bad thing. Like, a lot of those guys can come in and contribute from day one just because they're more closer to being NBA ready.
Well, you said it's only 4-year guys. That seems to fit into your philosophy anyway.
Yeah, we've never really, NIL, pre-NIL, whatever, we've never really, especially in the second round, approached it so much based on like one group of player that we prefer to take versus not, whether it's a development or a experienced guy. But I would say we try to just get the guys that we think still have some upside, and some of those 4-year guys that we've taken, we see some potential with in a different environment with a little more development work. You know, is there more we can get out of them as a pro? And I don't think that would change any now. It just comes down to, maybe now there's less of those young development project guys that'll be available at 39 because a lot of those guys are now going back for a second or third year in college first before taking the jump.
I was going to ask about NIL as well. Like, do you see it impacting it more this year than last year? Is it going to just keep going more, like impacting drafts?
I definitely think it's more than last year because I think it was probably still a little new last year in terms of what colleges knew how much they could sway guys to stay.
2 guys who went back last year, Colin Murray Boyles, who I thought was a consensus top 10 pick last year had he come out, but then he goes back. He has a much better season this year. The other guy who I think really hurt himself by not being able to be in the draft, and it wasn't NIL related, it was G League Ignite related, and that was Dink Pate. It kind of makes you see like what a difference a year can make. At this time last year, right, if we were projecting this draft forward, Nolan Traore was a top 5 pick, lock. Rocco Zakarski was a lottery pick, lock. Those guys will be very lucky to go top 45 this year. A lot of shit changes over, an entire season, but the NIL has absolutely impacted this draft, per my estimation. Whether we're talking about, Abdallas, whether we're talking about a group of players, Phylon, so many guys, Yaxel Landerborg, so many guys went back, right? Guys that I would have locked for first round. Now, what does this do to the draft? Obviously, it thins out the draft. And the further you go down the draft, the more impacted you are. Now, I think that it's worth noting the Raptors' number 9 pick is not impacted at all by this. At all. I don't think there's a single player who went back who could have gone top 10. So the board doesn't change there. Where it really changes is 39. Because now, as you start to slice away, like I want to imagine the Raptors 2 months ago, before all the withdrawals and all the guys returning for NIL, when still it was possible that guys like Ivisic and guys like that were still in this draft. Even I'm saying like the guys who you thought were going to declare but didn't declare and kind of shocked you. That pool went from about 200 players to almost 100 players. Now, if I rank out those 200 players, the player at 39, right, probably was a high-level role player projected. But now, since, let's say, 80 guys either went back, didn't declare, whatever, you start to shrink. And now, basically, like, I want to estimate, like, maybe the 50th guy on your board is now 39th. So this went from a crazy deep draft to a not super deep draft. And that doesn't mean you're not going to find value at 39. Obviously, your development is going to be a huge part of developing that guy. You have a G League program that is awesome. You have a team culture that's awesome. And obviously, teams ahead of you are probably going to make mistakes that you're not going to make. But it still does hurt you because, again, you're now picking the guy who was initially maybe 54th or 53rd or 52nd on your board. Maybe, I swear to God, 2 months ago, I was thinking Jameer Watkins wouldn't get drafted. Right now, I'm thinking he might be the best bet at 39. So it's really, it sucks for the Raptors. I feel like the pick 33, 34 is still going to be good, though. It sucks that there's kind of a fall off at 35. So I'm really hoping that, a couple teams get really, really high on someone like Hanson Yang, Rocco Zakarski, whatever guys who are expected to go bottom, and then maybe somebody falls. But, right now, my best case scenario for 39 is one of PENSARE or Hugo Gonzalez. One of those guys fall to the Raptors. Yeah, someone like that.
I do think at some point it's going to, I would imagine, plateau and players
It will
just, they'll understand, like, I think it's going to take a number of guys who maybe go back to school and they don't improve and it actually hurts their draft stock or something, to where will it balance out and a certain number of these guys will actually jump when they have the opportunity earlier or if it goes the other way. I don't know. Like it's kind of, I think, early enough in the kind of infancy of what it's going to do to maybe it's another or 1 or 2 draft cycles to like really kind of balance out. But I do think it seems to be a larger impact this year than it was last year, but who knows how long that'll keep going.
How does the draft process change when you're working with a contending team versus, you know, when you're working with a rebuilding team, you know, whether that's talking to prospects about what their future outlook might be, whether, you know, the internal conversations, just can you compare and contrast sort of those 2 cycles?
Honestly, not a lot. I think not a lot different. I would say it, when you're in a contending team situation, the guys you're taking, you know, you're going to have the ability to kind of develop them in the background while your main group is trying to, you know, get as deep in the playoffs as possible. So there's a little more runway with those guys to not be like thrown into the mix right away.
Kind of like what OKC is doing with Ousmane Dieng.
But that doesn't change the fact that like we're still looking to draft the same players. It's just that maybe with a non-contending team, you know, there's going to be minutes available for this guy early on to where you can kind of get a read on them earlier to see like, do they have what it takes to be an NBA guy and stick? But I wouldn't say the actual process of the drafting is any different, or at least the way that we approach it. Like maybe it's, I would say if, as a contending team, maybe you value the pick more as an asset that you can use to go get a player in a trade that can plug into your rotation better if you're like pushing to make more, you know, playoff impact. But again, like if you're just strictly on the draft, if you're taking the pick versus keeping or trading it, I would say you're probably still going to take the same players. It just comes down to how much do you get out of that player in the first couple of years.
Is there something you learned or that was illustrated, emphasized in these playoffs and maybe specifically the finals?
Great question.
That you're bringing into this draft that, I guess, what did you learn from the playoffs and the finals?
I wouldn't say anything in particular. I think it highlights how physical the game is come playoff. Like it's clearly a difference of like just the intensity ratchets up.
I just want to say everything he's saying, I'm sort of spot checking it as that comment is a vote for this guy. That comment is a vote for that guy. I try to dissect these interviews because I don't feel that the Raptors lie. I just think they withhold, obviously, the details of what they're saying, but there's no reason for them to mislead too drastically. Like they'll say, we're going to take the best player available. That's just playing it coy. Obviously, they could just say, we love Carter Bryant, but they're not going to do that. So I'm saying when they say the physicality is something they're noticing, I'm thinking about a few players that do well with physicality. I'm thinking about Colin Murray-Boyles, right? I'm not thinking about Yegor Demon, right? I'm thinking about not Trey Johnson and maybe not so much Ace Bailey, but I'm thinking about Dylan Harper, even though he's not going to be there at number 9 for us. I'm thinking a little bit about Carter Bryant for sure. I'm maybe not thinking as much about Kaman Malawash, but I'm thinking about Derek Queen. So again, there's just like, and you start to go down a draft checklist of what are they looking for? They're looking for wingspan. They're looking for this. They're looking for that. They're looking for this. Which prospect satisfies the most is probably the guy that's going to be really high on their board.
Defense is so much more important, which is why I think Darko and our coaching staff, like they preach that so much, knowing that, you know, someday like we're hoping to be in that situation. And so you have to be ready for when the physicality goes up a level. Like, can you take it? Or are you stuck in the, you know, complaining with refs and stuff because they're not getting the foul calls you normally do in, you know, November and December. Huge
point. And I just want to say, if you've played competitive sports at any level, especially high level, right? I don't want to say super high level with basketball, but I got high enough that I can tell you when that physicality ratchets up. I went for a G League tryout once, and I got to tell you, that shit got really physical because everyone's kind of competing for a roster spot. And you saw certain guys when they got like hit, how their entire physiology changed, their entire demeanor to the game changed, right? Some enjoyed it. Some hated it, never went back into the paint. So if I can completely put you off your pivot as a basketball player by just being physical with you and maybe grabbing your arm a little bit and bumping you a little bit hard on a screen, you're not for me, and you're not going to be, you know, successful. Michael, same email as eTransfers works for you? Yes, same email. It's my email. Okay.
And so it seems like the teams that can just fight through that, stay mentally strong, and actually like take those hits and keep executing despite the more physical defense you're seeing on a possession basis. Those are the guys that they're being successful in the playoffs. And so I think that, you know, the way we approach it is like, yeah, we want to get players that can eventually be playoff basketball players. And so, you know, if they're not physically ready to take that sort of hit right away, at least we want to get guys that have the mental fortitude to be able to, once they get stronger and are ready to take the actual pounding that the playoffs is, they can fight through it, and eventually they'll be ready to impact it. But yeah, I'd say, you know, that's kind of like we've been there. Like I think this franchise has been in the playoffs enough with like the group of people around here, and our coaches have been around the playoffs enough elsewhere as opposed to the last couple of years, that I think everyone knows like how intense it is and how draining it can be of a process to fight through and try to win 4 games against the same team. It takes a certain type of player to understand that, and you know that those are the types of guys we're looking for.
Players that immediately jump to mind as he's talking right now: Jeremiah Fears, Derek Queen, Colin Murray-Boyles. That's who really jumps to mind. Colin Knippel, if we're just talking about taking bumps and not being too affected by it, mental fortitude, stability, stoic demeanor, not getting too rattled, not complaining to the refs. I'm thinking Colin Knippel. I'm definitely thinking about Carter Bryant. Always thinking about Carter Bryant. You know, when he says, you know, when they can get a little bit stronger, when you really see Carter play at an earlier level, you see that as his frame fills out, he's going to be very sturdy, very strong, very athletic. Certainly thinking about all those guys. I'm also thinking a little bit about Nick Clifford, for sure. You know, plus size playmaker, older guy, can kind of come in right away. But, you know, are you really going to take a 23-year-old top 10 in the NBA draft? I don't know. Cedric Howard, certainly. I'm not really getting warm feelings about Rasheer Fleming in this sense. But yeah, I feel like they're talking about Colin Murray-Boyles a lot when they're talking here, especially if someone dares to ask the question about shooting. But yes, post-hub playmaker, high feel, loves contact, super tough, not a complainer, plays through. When I was watching the NBA playoffs, I was thinking about like a guy like Carter right now, Colin, come on, coming in and replacing one of these guys. I was constantly trying to sim it out in my head. Jeremiah Fears, Colin Knippel. I was thinking which one of these guys in a couple of years could at least play in a series like this with this level of physicality, this level of execution. It's hard to imagine that Derek Queen couldn't have played in these playoffs, man. I'm gonna tell you that right now. It's just so physical, so draining, so imposing, so talented. Very very hard to imagine. I don't think Danny Wolf could have played in these playoffs, and be real about that. I think Cedric Howard's inability to read the floor might have exposed him a little bit. I do think Carter could have played just balls to the wall kind of energy defense for 5 minutes, 5-minute stretches. I think Colin Murray-Boyles, if he can shoot a little bit better, could have been dominant in the playoffs. Just so physical, so strong. Doesn't get off his tilt too much, you know? Like, again, like how do you absorb contact is a really huge part of it. Some guys just don't do well with it. And I think it's not just about like how it adjusts your release and stuff, right? If you check out Kirk Goldsberry looking at all of Shea's makes and misses in the playoffs, you see so many shots in the paint. He led the entire finals with points in the paint, which is crazy because he's a guard who's very wiry, but his ability to absorb contact is special. His ability to stay on balance mentally and physically is very, very impressive. When I think about players like that, I'm thinking about, you know, maybe the efficiency doesn't show that, but I look at a Jeremiah Fears and his just crafty ability to just attack, attack, attack. If you can fix some of those releases, if you can add a bit more of a floater game, Jeremiah Fears could be like the 3rd best player in this draft class very easily. So there's definitely some hints he's dropping here.
Is there a specific urgency this year to improve the team, either through the draft or through free agency, because the fact that the East seems to be more open in this upcoming season?
I wouldn't say an urgency as much as like I think this was like a big part of why we did the Brandon Ingram trade was, you know, that we see him as you know, a big addition to our team next year, regardless of what he brought this past year. So I wouldn't say the East is any more open. I think it's still going to be very difficult because I'm sure there's a lot of these teams that are kind of.
That's bullshit. It is way more open. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude. I just simply disagree. With Tyrese Halliburton's injury, Jason Tatum's injury, Milwaukee being removed as a threat. I mean, really, a healthy Milwaukee team tooling around Dame, one final hurrah with Giannis. That's a very different equation than going without Dame. The East is way more open. Like, he's wrong about that.
In the midfield they're going to be trying to make that jump up to contention too. So, yeah, I think, we definitely feel like we're just trying to get the pieces in place that when we're healthy, when we're, ready to actually make a run as a group and on the same page, and chemistry is where we think it can get to.
Tanking confirmed. Y'all realize there's this video of Sam Presti circling around NBA Twitter from 2021 where he talks about the next time we make the playoffs, we don't want it to be an appearance, we want it to be an arrival. I believe that was the quote. I think that's sort of what he's saying here. You're tooling around Scotty right now. You're figuring things out. You're playing guys in and out of the rotation. You're playing suboptimal lineups. You're playing a lot of young guys. But the minute you add a Brandon Ingram to it, it changes everything. It really does. If you add a Stretch Bake off the bench and Brandon Ingram next year, you're a 47-win team. Darko Rakovic will be coach of the year next year. I'm actually fairly certain about that. And in my opinion, and if you watch us on the panel, I gave him coach of the year this year for what he did this year. I thought Darko did a brilliant job. There's no nationalism involved. I'd be saying this if my backup probably within the top 5 was Jordy Fernandez. You know what I mean?
That we're ready to be in a point of actually competing with some of those teams that have been ahead of us. It's just being, ready for when that opportunity comes. And so we're just trying to get our group together and going. And I think BI is going to be a big part of that group. And then from there, what we can kind of put in around the edges to keep pushing that forward is important. But at the same time, like, we're not looking to sacrifice any of our long-term with the, we still have a really young group of players. So we want to keep developing while maybe getting more competitive in the process.
We've all seen and read about Bailey and whether he worked out here or there, didn't want to. Did you get everybody in you wanted in, and was it any different than any other year?
I mean, no, I would never say that we got everybody in we wanted to. I think it's always the song and dance you do with agents of, they're going to tell you the guys for sure going ahead of us. And so, they only work out for a certain number of teams. And then there's another whole group of players who say that we would never consider their guy at 9 or wherever. And so they don't send them to us because they have to prioritize teams in the range that they think their guys are going to go. So there's always this like kind of back and forth of where your pick lands and can you get everybody in? And it's impossible to get everybody in, but you do your best with the scheduling. And there's definitely some guys that, we would have really liked to get in up here that they just, for whatever reason, prioritized other teams or scheduling for whatever reason of just being able to fit in the certain number of teams in the certain number of days. And it is what it is, but that's where we scout these guys so much during the season that what a workout does, doesn't really sway you that much. It is nice to get them here and to get to know them a little bit. And honestly, to get some of your non-scouting staff around them. But from a getting to know guys standpoint, it's just a workout, honestly.
That is a really, really good point. There's almost always this assumption that because you didn't work this player out, that you're not going to draft them. In a lot of ways, if you're I don't want to bring up 2K here, but you realize when you play those simulations out in 2K and then it shows you how much you've scouted a player and it has a bar from 0% to 99%. And so, as you're playing the as you're playing the season out, you send your scouts to watch them, send them once, twice, thrice. The bar moves 66%. Then you do the draft combine, the bar goes up to 90%. And then you bring them in for a workout and the bar goes to 100%. But if you don't bring them in for a workout, you're already confident in them. You might not even have to bring them in for a workout to draft them. If you're fully comfortable, it's not like, let's just say hypothetically, and I actually, I don't know why I'm so, it's almost like I don't want to know. Like I know a way to confirm so easily if they worked Carter Bryant out, but I don't even want to know at this point because I'm scared about what that's going to mean if they didn't work him out. And I almost don't want to flex, not flex. I almost don't want to stress the situation out or stress myself out going into the draft. But let's just say hypothetically they didn't work out Carter Bryant for a multitude of reasons, because maybe he has a promise from Brooklyn at 8 and they didn't feel the need to, or maybe the Raptors just simply do not like him enough and they're just like, listen, we're only working out our top 9 guys based on us keeping the 9th pick. We're only, if Carter is 18th on their board, let's just say hypothetically the Raptors hate Carter Bryant and I love Carter Bryant, let's just say that's the case, right? If he's 17th on their board and there's no chance in hell he's going to be there at 39, there isn't much of a reason to work him out. If you're that confident that he's not top 14 on your board, there isn't a reason to do that. So again, like I think maybe the stuff, and then, at the same time, let's just say Carter is like 3rd on your board. Well, now you really, really don't need to work him out, right? Because at this point, you're just cueing everybody else to know that this guy's not going to be available, right? So again, you don't know who loves who in this draft process. I'm sure that a lot of people didn't know that Masai Ujiri was in love with Giannis Antetokounmpo in 2013, or that the Raptors were in love with Pascal Siakam in 2016. But what's interesting to note is that, let's just say 2 teams have Carter Bryant top 5. Let's just say, hypothetically, this is why this whole fucking thing is a game of poker and a game of chicken. Let's just say, hypothetically, the Atlanta Hawks and the Toronto Raptors, I'm not saying these are the 2 teams. Let's say Spurs. Let's say the Spurs and fuck the Spurs. Let's say the Bulls and the Raptors both have Carter Bryant top 5 on their board, right? Let's just say, hypothetically, the Bulls feel comfortable that he will be there at 10. So they're thinking, we want to make a trade with Phoenix, give them an additional pick so we can get Carter at 10. Now, if the Raptors make it known that they're interested in Carter Bryant and, they're super, we start leaking, press stuff from Michael Grange and stuff about how the Raptors are super high on a multi-positional wing or whatever. Well, now maybe they trade with Brooklyn instead, and now you lose your guy. You never want to tip your hand in terms of who is high, especially when you have someone higher than the expectation. So if the Raptors truly have like Kaman Malawach as 2nd on their board or 3rd on their board, don't work him out. Don't fucking work him out. You only need to work out guys who are behind your range, in my opinion, or guys who are in your range. Anyone who is significantly above or significantly below doesn't need to be worked out. That's how I would approach the draft. If anybody ever decides to hire me as a general manager, I'm wide open to it.
So it wouldn't preclude you from drafting a guy that didn't
No. No, I mean, I think we said it last year. Like, we did not work out Jacoby last year.
There you go.
We didn't get him as an interview at the combine last year. And so we somewhat blindly took him, but we did enough background on him. We had a good enough relationship with his representation that we felt very comfortable with taking him when our pick came up. And we got lucky that he fell the way he did. But yeah, it is what it is, we didn't hold it against them for not sending here because they didn't expect to be around at 19. And I think it's the same with 9 this year. It's like there's a lot of guys that don't think they'll be on the board at 9. And if they happen to be that, we're gonna consider them just like we would have had they been here.
Yeah, and say there's that expectation of who this first 7, 8 will be. How do you feel about that next crop? Is there very little to separate the next 6, 7, 8 guys, or do you maybe just see 2, 3 key guys that you have?
Oh no, it's a big group of guys that are kind of that next tier of players consideration. And honestly, our 8 is probably different than every other team's 8, above us. And so where the lines are made of who goes ahead of us to the next 6 guys after us, 7 guys after us, whatever, it's kind of blurry. And ours is going to be different than everybody else's. It's definitely going to be different than what you're reading online. But no, we really like the tier of players that we're in right now, and we're trying to figure out the order of it. That's what these meetings over the next few days are going to do, to kind of get to a place where we're like comfortable with it is. But the biggest thing with that is it opens things up. Like if we're really comfortable with this group of players and guys that were comfortable, like through these meetings, if they end up still being on the board later in the draft, when the draft actually comes, like that's where conversations of trying to jump back in and get a guy because we have them ranked so high during this process is it comes out, So these are what all these kind of leading up to the draft, these meetings do, is it sorts out not only what we'll do at 9, but also how it shapes the rest of the draft.
Dan, have you guys been able to incorporate AI into the drafting process?
I mean, I'm sure in some way. I mean, I'd like to hope that none of our scouts are using it to write reports, but no, I don't know. It's like it's a part of everything these days, like it's definitely not, we're not having models run on it. And so much of this is we're tackling this the same way we always have with, you have to see these guys in person. You have to like really feel like a gut instinct on what you feel about these players, regardless of what any sort of machine learning can tell us. But then we also take in analytics and we take in, these different perspectives on it. But I wouldn't say that it's like shaping or changing the way that we're doing this process at all.
Obviously, last year you took Ulrich as a long-term project, and I know he got hurt, but a year later, are you excited about him? Were you pleased with the steps he took? Is he meeting kind of what you saw last year?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if he said, no, we're not excited about him? Again, these are pointed questions. They don't, I don't know what purpose something like that serves. Like, again, I'm not trying to micromanage questions that other people are asking, but how much more relevant would a question like, how do you feel he's progressed in the time since his injury, and do you expect him to play in the summer league? Hypothetically, that would at least offer some good information. Are you still high on him? I hope. I mean, it's a little open-ended, so I hope he touches on all that stuff and talks about his summer league, but we'll see.
I mean, I think it definitely kind of went as expected for the year, where it was, maybe a couple months of like growing pains, figuring things out, just the speed of the game, the physicality, all that stuff. But it seemed like by the last couple months of his season pre-injury, like he was really trending in the right direction. And it was super unfortunate that he got hurt when he did, because with the way the main team was going, like we were really hoping to see him mixed in there and getting minutes with the big club. Just to, again, like as a measuring stick to see what the summer should look like and then this next year. But I think from a like the progress that he's shown in 1 year, it was, pretty promising in terms of like, this is what we were hoping to see and expecting. I think physically he's really improved. He's getting stronger, and it's just a matter of time for the game to slow down for him and to really like start to pick things up. And I mean, as you guys all know, like the NBA is, there's so much that goes into it in terms of just like the understanding of the game and defensive reads and offensive sets and like the amount of things that are being thrown at him for where he came from. It's going to take time for that to really digest. And I think all the work he's put in on his game, in the weight room, these sorts of things, like he's doing the work to prepare for when all those things kind of click. And I think defensively, he showed, at least in the G League, some potential in terms of just naturally being a gifted, like, impact player on that end of the floor. So what we can unlock, the rest of it is just a matter of time. And, we'll see him at Summer League. He should be back ready to go for that. And then we'll see where the summer goes and what it brings for next year. But I'd say the development plan, it hasn't changed any in terms of the timeline that he's on, and it's I think if everyone just has a nice slow approach to like just watching what this kid can turn into, the result might be pretty fun at the end.
So that was Dan Tolzman talking about the draft. Let's get into some sort of key takeaways from this. Number one, the thing that he said about Ulrich at the end, I really hear him on Ulrich. I watched Ulrich every game that Ulrich played this year in the G League. Last year, of course, Summer League. Watched a lot of his, Africa tape. I had his trainer, Joe Tuamu, on last year. You guys will remember that interview. And my entire takeaway was everything checks out. Everything that I thought he would be, the short roll passing, the defense, the athleticism, the switchability, some of the shot making, the dunking, the fluidity, the open court transition stuff. It's great. It's great, And look, who was Pascal Siakam at 18? Pretty much Ulrich, right? Super bouncy, hustle. What you can't teach with Ulrich is his size, fluidity, flexibility. What you can teach, hopefully, is the game. He doesn't understand the game right now at all. He's playing, honestly, his understanding of the game is close to some kids that I played with in high school. He doesn't understand always when to do, what to do, how to do. But he understands how to do it in the sense that he plays with full force. He sprints down the court. You got to keep things very simple for him. This is not going to be some all-star progression, but at the same time, if there's a player who's picked that late in the draft at 18 years old who has all-star upside, it's probably Ulrich. Now, again, I say upside largely due to the physical tools, not due to anything else. But there is actually, that's a lie. One more thing, his aptitude and ability to learn and his ability to be coached. I've talked to a lot of people who covered him down the G League more personally, people who are able to observe him in practices, people who are able to observe him in media availability, people who are able to talk to him, maybe be around the team a little bit more because I don't have a press pass for the G League. And their entire takeaway was, what a kid, what a sponge, what a worker, right? This is not the type of person you bet against, honestly. When Joe Tuma was on, he talked about how intelligent Ulrich was. So you combine elite athleticism with high intelligence, good raw tools, in terms of speed, burst, vertical length, etc., coordination, just very coordinated athlete. And then you start to combine, the work ethic and all that stuff with it, the aptitude, the coachability, so huge, right? The ability to take coaching, not to be some, and of course the habits, right? Something we talked about with Brian Macon, right? Scotty's habits. When we talked to Scotty's trainer, that was a huge thing, you look at these players and you start to see a consistent player type. No, a consistent personality type that the Raptors seem to be very drawn to because as Ulrich is how Scotty is how Jacoby is how Grady is how Ochai is how, all these guys are Mobo, Shed. They're all this way. So I start to see, like, when I'm listening to these players in interviews and I start to see someone who's very braggadocious, or I see someone who's a little bit conceited, a little bit hard-headed, a player who has maybe a track record of bitching and complaining too much, a player who has off-court red flags, a player who maybe doesn't strike me as the most coachable, player who consistently abandons your team's game plan. I'm like, that's not a Raptors prospect. And now, especially over the last year, how much the Raptors have prioritized defense, it really does make me think the Raptors are going to care a lot about defensive upside with this 9th overall pick, because who have they drafted that wasn't a good defender? Who? I mean, Norman Powell wasn't a great defender, and granted, it was a second round pick, but OG, Pascal, Jakob, Scotty, apart from Grady, they all were good defenders coming out of the draft, and if not great defenders. Even DeLon Wright had a good defensive reputation at Utah. Fred VanVleet, undrafted guy, but a pesky defender. Jamal Shed, shit. So basically, like Mobo last year, Ulrich, this team gets it. They get it. And when you look at a Jonathan Mobo, I want you to squint your eyes and see a Lou Dort, because there is some real potential there. I was debating with somebody yesterday during one of our live streams about, Jonathan Mobo being a plus defender, and I was shocked. I can't remember who the hell was saying it. Joey Graham was before Masai Ujiri's time. just gonna throw that out there. I think Masai hadn't even been hired when that happened as the assistant general manager. I think Masai came on as assistant general manager in 07. Joey Graham was picked in 05. So well before Masai's time. Joey Graham was Rob Babcock. Yeah. So anyways, so I'm just saying, I think the Raptors, like, if I keep thinking, I just keep coming back to the same handful of players. And Dan Tolzman, I believe Bobby Webster, in his interview with Hello and Welcome with William Liu and Alex Wong, said that they've narrowed it down to 5. If I had to pick the 5 right now, I'm thinking Carter Bryant for sure. Noah Senge for sure. Colin Murray Boyles for sure. Derek Queen, Kaman Malawach. Does that kind of check out as the top 5? The guys that they're looking at, Jeremiah Fears, maybe you add a 6th one there. Cedric Howard, you add a 7th. I don't see Rasheer Fleming at 9, guys. I got to tell you that. I really don't. I don't see that. I don't necessarily see Cedric Howard at 9. It would be such a stretch. Like they would have to. I just Chad B saying Grady. Yeah, like the Grady thing. It's a little bit scarring for me mentally because it's just I've never been so wrong about a Raptors draft prospect. Right? If you remember last year, where was my board when they picked Jacoby? He was the second best player left on my board. The number 1 was Ibnisi. Number 2 was Jacoby. With Grady, there were like 7 players left on the board that I had higher than Grady, and they picked Grady. And it's shattered my confidence in my ability to predict this draft and predict Masai because I've been usually pretty good. Christian Koloko could have called it from a mile away. Scotty Barnes called it from a mile away on record. But something about this team has sort of changed. The playmaking upside and feel has started to matter a lot more. If playmaking had mattered this much to the Raptors, 10 years ago, maybe they don't select OG Anunoby. He wasn't a great playmaker or a passer at Indiana. So, yeah, I think, get ready to learn CMB, right? Yeah, Colin makes so much sense for the Raptors. So much sense. And I think he has a lot of untapped potential. I think if the Raptors do trade back, though, there's a lot of value from trading back, right? If you were to say, hypothetically, let's just say the Brooklyn Nets get really desperate and they want another top 10 pick, right? If you were to trade for 18, 26, 27, or I think it's 18, 27, 28. I think it's 26 and 27. They have 26, 27, and 18. So let's say hypothetically trade 9 for 18, 26, and 27. I feel like you could really cook up with those 3 picks. I think those 3 picks might actually be more valuable than the 9th overall pick if your top targets are off the board. I really do wonder actually at this point, how does the Raptors board truly break out? There's like obviously tiers when you look at boards. If you look at the boards on X, everyone's posting their board. I'm going to post mine tomorrow. You'll see tiers. They're color coded usually. And it kind of depends on where your board breaks. And I feel like from listening to Dan Tolzman, it feels like their board probably breaks around obviously 1, and then again, maybe around 2. But I think that next group might not break until 11. And the reason I say this is because of how they approached this entire draft process all along. They didn't try to bottom out. They didn't try to shut down Scotty. I promise you, if their board broke at 6, they would have been trying to shut Scotty down. But because there was really no way to control where they ended up in the draft, they just kind of rolled with and they said, look, we don't think there's a big gap between 8 and 10 in this draft, or 7 and 6, or 6 and 5, or whatever. So if those 2 are off the board, which there was no way to control it, as evidenced by the fact that Dallas won the fucking draft, if there's no way to control that, and there's no way to control getting Cooper flagged, then what you have to look is your board tiers. And I'm curious, and I would love to know if somebody does know and someone has credible information on this somehow on the Raptors board, let me know. It's kind of weird. I mean, not to get all distracted here because I do need to get to the gym in about 5 minutes, but it's so awesome how many people will selectively reach out to me and be like, hey, I got this information about the Raptors, blah, 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 blah. And they're usually like very, very credible people. It's always interesting to pick up those tidbits. So I do love I love when people do that. It's very helpful for me and my analysis, because sometimes I'll be like going gung ho over a prospect and someone will reach out to me, like someone who's actually credible, and I vet these sources very carefully, and they'll just be like, the Raptors are super not interested in this guy. I promise you. Like their scouts didn't like him, blah, 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 blah. So that's always interesting. But nevertheless, I keep going back to Carter Bryant. Carter Bryant makes a ton of sense for this team. I can imagine him on this team. I find it very difficult to imagine a team that passed up, a team that's building around Scotty, a team that liked Jamal Shed, Jacoby Walter, a team that's prioritizing team first, culture, all the stuff, the team that drafted, the GM or the president that drafted Pascal and OG, that they would not see the value in Carter. If nothing else, they probably have Carter top 5 on their board. That's how I would feel about it if I was the Raptors. And if the Raptors hired me as a scout, the first thing I would say is we have to think about the long-term vision with this kid. You know, you have to think about the projectable upside of a kid who harasses his assistant coaches at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 10 a.m., and has to be told you can't work out anymore. That's the kid I want to invest in. I want to invest in a kid who recovered from a super severe injury and always kept a smile on his face. I want to invest in a kid who has spent the entire draft process shouting out his co-draft tees. He hasn't done a lot of self-promotion. In fact, that's probably his biggest detriment, you know? So, yeah. If they take him at 9, you hired. Cool. Walmart Scout. I'll take it. Cool. All right. I starred 2 questions very quickly. In your opinion, what's the hardest skill to develop? That's a really good question. I have no idea. What is the hardest skill to develop? I don't think it's a handle. I don't think it's a shot. What is it? Motor. No. It's not really a skill from a basketball perspective, but I think ironically proprioception, sort of knowing where your body is in space relative to other players and sort of getting sensory information, that sort of special skill that Shea and Kobe that they have, that they've always had, frankly. If you watch Shea when he's 18, 19, you can see this is a high element score for him. Kobe when he was 17, 18, Laura Marion, you could see that with him, right? He's just flying off guys. He's taking all the information from around him. His body is like, even when Kobe would, I think there was a story prior to Kobe getting drafted where, they put him against some NBA players in a pre-draft ritual, in a pre-draft, and he cooked them. And they were really good NBA defenders that he was destroying. I think it was Michael Cooper, and he went up against Michael Cooper, who was a veteran All NBA defender, and he destroyed him in a workout. And they said that, or at least the feedback at the time that I remember, because I was a kid at the time, was that his feel for manipulating his body relative to the other player's body. So I think that's the hardest thing. You see OG struggle with this to this day. It's not due to a lack of reps, and you see Luka just doing so well with it. So yeah, I think that's a really hard thing to develop. Also, footwork, I feel, is very hard to develop. You see all these guys going to the camps with Hakeem Olajuwon, and they just come out and they're the same player, like that robotic sort of movement patterns. So I think that's really hard. From a basketball skills perspective, I'm just trying to think about like what was the hardest thing for me to develop. Wasn't shooting. Shooting came very easy. Free throw shooting, 3-point shooting, movement shooting, all came very easily. I think it depends on the player, man. But like for me, passing was extremely difficult. So anticipatory passing, vision, timing, the angles, and getting the targeting right and stuff. Like you got to understand, like the shit is moving a mile a minute, and you're trying to make a pass on the move. The kind of stuff that Scotty Barnes, Tyrese Halliburton, Luka Doncic, LeBron James, guys like this can do on the move. Both hands, putting it in your pocket, finding you over the defense, under the defense, through the defense. Man, that shit is very, very difficult to figure out. So, yes, I think passing is very difficult. Also, Jarris Walker really left his mark on the finals. Why were you so high on him again? Also, if you're going to try to cook me on a player, try to make sure that player wasn't injured during the finals. I mean, that would be really, really good. But also, Jarris Walker is, I think, 21 years old. I like him for a lot of the same reasons I like Colin Murray Boyles and Carter Bryant. He's portable. He can fit in to 2-3 different positions. He can maybe eventually bulk up and play small ball 5, small ball 4, big wing 3. He's really good kid from everything I heard about him. He has a lot of untapped potential. If the Pacers want to move off of Jarris Walker, I'll take him to this day. I like him. I still like him. And you know what? Like a lot of people were trying to like really hate on me. I think 2 years ago for my Dyson Daniels stuff, they were just like, "Oh my God, this guy's like that. He can't shoot. He can't do this. He can't do that. He can't even get minutes on New Orleans. They're terrible. He's not better than this guy, that guy, that guy, that guy. He's a third stringer." And now what? So it's just like I try to say this not to be, a condescending asshole, but I'm not usually wrong. I'm usually early. All right. I'll talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Try one thing for me. Can y'all do me a favor? Can you take this little clicky thing that you got here, a mouse, and just move to the bottom of that video? And there's that thumbs up or thumbs down. And based on whether or not you like this video, can you click thumbs up if you liked it? And if you didn't like it, you can click thumbs down and leave me a comment. And if you didn't like it, tell me why you didn't like it. Peace. Talk to y'all later. Go to the gym, enjoy the heat, turn on the AC, drink some beer. Peace.